All right, so in this lesson, we're going to go over how to automate SAP with Excel. This will be one of the few lessons I don't use Python in, but I have used this in the past when I've worked with SAP, and I found it very useful. So if you've used SAP in the past, a lot of times you need to either pull screen prints or data pulls or something, and it can be really time consuming sometimes. I worked at a company where we had to pull pricing information and we had to pull 250 samples and take screen prints in SAP of pricing and what price it was per product. So it took someone like a week worth of time. We set up this automation and we could do the same thing in a couple of hours. But it's something that I looked for a lot whenever I started working with SAP, and over time I kind of figured out how to make it work. I'm probably going to pull up a little bit of my blog just because I think it kind of helps you understand. And really, I don't have access to SAP anymore. I'm not currently in an SAP shop, but I hope you'll be able to get the idea of it. All right. So really, the first thing is that you need to, in your SAP instance, you need to be able to see that this is highlighted. I've seen it grayed out at some companies, and that basically means that your IT team has decided that you're not allowed to build scripts from SAP, because what you can do with this is you can kind of record it like a macro. It'll save all your steps, and then you can put it into Excel and automate the processes that you're doing manually. So once you see that at your company you have this enabled, if you don't, you need to talk to IT to see if they will enable it. But most of the places I've been to, it seems to be enabled by default. All right, so the next thing you do, once you click on that, you'll be able to click script recording and run back. And it'll bring up a box like this. So basically, whenever you click on this, it's going to prompt you to save it in a certain area. It does default to a place, but I remember it being kind of deep in your computer and not something easy to remember. You can change this to be like desktop, and that way it'll save it to the desktop. You have to give it a name and everything. After you do that, you can click on this record button, and it will start recording your steps. Okay, so um, if I had SAP, maybe I would go into MB51 or or vendor master table or whatever. I would type in the the products I'm trying to use, or the movements of inventory I'm trying to do, and just like export the report and do everything that I'm trying to accomplish um, manually. I'll do it one time manually with the idea you're going to automate those steps going forward. And then you're going to click on the stop button to stop the recording. It's going to save a file that looks a lot like this on your computer, wherever you've told it to save or wherever it's saved it to. And then if you double click on it, it's just gonna run and it'll basically redo all the things you just did manually, which is fine, but you probably don't want that. We'll want to take it and potentially manipulate it. So you're gonna open it in Notepad, right? You'll just right click on it and say open in Notepad, and you'll be able to see the code that's inside of it. Now, I will say the top portion of this is really telling your computer to launch SAP. But we kind of have that built into our Excel file that's downloadable here. Um, so we don't necessarily need it. We need everything after this and if, this ending and if. You want everything below. And we'll kind of blow this up so I can show you a little bit better what it's doing. But in this example, I went to like MB51, and like each of the buttons and fields in SAP has a definition of what it's called, um, and what we sent. Like I probably pushed a button that says go, and then we put in like, this is probably the plant number. We say Memphis, and then you're going to put in some other numbers. It looks like, I wanted movement type 101, and then I put in like between these dates. So it's going to save like every step you did. So we're going to want to copy that and save it into our Excel workbook. So I'll switch over to our Excel workbook at this point. So this is the workbook I have out there that you guys can download. All right. And I do give you some instructions inside of the Excel file as well, just so you don't necessarily need to go to the blog every time, but you'll be able to see it. All right. So to open up um, the code that's related to a macro, if you don't know, is I always just hit Alt F11. And I think I actually put that in the instructions too, just so you would know. Right, Alt F11. Okay. So I do have a couple of different modules, but the one that's important is going to be SAP to Excel. And it kind of opens up in these different windows, but you can blow it up. So whenever you take the information from the VBS file that SAP will create for you, you'll come in here and I have little comments that are here. This is where you'll put it between these two comments. So that's where you'll put your code, right in here. All right. And then I'll go over this a little bit, but at the beginning, I really do close all Excel workbooks and SAP instances. I found that this helps just to avoid any errors that you might have going forward. So it does give you a warning message. That's what's going to say. It's going to go ahead and close all your Excel files and SAP. It's not going to save anything. It's just going to close it. So make sure it's going to give you a warning. But whenever you see this warning, if you haven't closed everything you really want to close, click no and go ahead and do those things. I'll go ahead and show you. I'll have to enable the macros. Let me do that real quick. Nope. Let me close it and reopen it. SAP to Excel. All right, so we'll give you this warning. It's gonna go ahead and warn you. It's gonna close all the other Excel files and close all the other instances of SAP. So if I don't want to do that, I'll click no, and it'll end the program, and you can go delete everything you need to. All right, if you click yes, then it'll go ahead and run the rest of it. This is the name of the SAP instance. So you'll need to kind of look up, if you have separate instances, you'll need to look up what your instances are called and replace this with what the instance of SAP is called. And it should show its name. Whenever you launch SAP, it should show you all the instances you have at your company. And from that screen, you'll be able to pull that name and put that here. So for me, I built this as a list. So if you put separated by a comma, it will do these same steps on every instance of SAP. So potentially if you have more than one instance of SAP, you can do these steps through each one. All right, this is going to kill all other instances of SAP. This is a little helper I put in here to potentially you can save the variables of where you want your data file exports to be saved. So sometimes I would do that. Sometimes I would also look for dates, like the week in the past. So these are maybe just some ideas of how you can use variables in your program. All right, and then this is going to go ahead and close all other Excel workbooks to make sure that no other Excel workbooks or anything's going to cause any issues. All right, and then um, it's going to kill SAP, but it's going to wait like 15 seconds is what this is doing, because sometimes it does take a little while for it to completely go away. And then this section is going to open up SAP, and it also does wait about 15 seconds to start loading. If your instance takes longer, you might need to increase this number from 15 to 20 seconds just to make sure that it's open, because the program is going to keep going to the next step, and it's going to look for specific objects. But if it's not open yet, it's going to look for them, and it's going to give you an error that it couldn't find them. So if you think that's the issue, you might need to increase this time, but 15 seconds, at least for me, has seemed to work consistently. All right, so all this is going to basically open it. All right, this section, so I've had one company where had single sign-on, so I didn't need to create a username password or enter one whenever I opened SAP, but I've had other ones where you did need to put a username and password. So I would say you need to put your username and password here if you have to enter it as part of your logging into SAP. But if you don't, you really need to either comment this out by just putting a single quote like this, just to save it for later, or you can just delete it altogether, and that would work fine as well. But you definitely don't want to just leave it here, because it's going to go look for these text boxes on SAP and try and put in a username and password. And if they don't show up for you, then it's going to say it couldn't find it, and it's going to error out. All right. So this is a section where we pasted code. Now, in the recording that I have in my training in on my blog, it shows how I went into MB51 and did some work. But in this one, I built this probably a little bit later, but I can see that what I did is I went in and I wanted to pull pricing information. And I wanted to pull pricing information from my samples tab. So what this is doing is it's going to my samples tab. It is looking for column 4, and it's looking for column 12. Let's see what's 12 and 12. Okay, so we would look up plant number and material number. Okay, and what this is it's doing a for loop. So it's going to go through each one, right? So in theory, what it's going to do is it's going to go into SAP. It's going to go look for MM19. It's going to look for the material, the plant. It's going to take a screen print. And to be honest, this little section right here is the screen print. And it's going to paste it into my screen prints tab. So right here, okay? And then it's going to do the next one. So it'll do that for all the items in my samples list. And that's kind of how I built this, so that, if I have a lot of things I want to pull from SAP, I can put it in this samples tab. It'll loop through each one. It'll do those steps in SAP. It'll take a screen print, which is often what I need. The other thing I've done is you can save files, and that's what I kind of have used this for in the past, to like save the path I want to use, and then I'll put that variable into my code each time. If you record yourself saving something in SAP, it'll save those steps here, and then you can just put the file location you want them to be in consistently in your code. All right. And then this actually is going to turn error messages back on, because I actually turn them off up here. And that way, like, Excel alerts won't cause me issues. But I definitely want to put those back on. That way, whenever I close like an Excel file, it prompts me to like save or something like that. All right, now it does kill SAP at the end. And the reason I do this is because I did set this up to potentially go through different instances of SAP and perform the same operation. So whenever I am in one instance, this will just kill SAP and it'll start back over. It will reopen SAP and it will then look for the instance, the second instance, if that makes sense. So, um, but that's how this works. And you can paste your code in here and just run it and it'll work. If you guys have any issues when you're trying to do this, let me know. I will say a lot of the times the issues are going to happen is that you'll perform one step. And since this is just doing a step right away, the next screen sometimes doesn't have time to load. So a lot of times I'll put a little bit of wait time into different steps that are failing just so that the next step would show up. And I can tell that this one, it showed up for pricing. It showed the pricing screen, but the pricing, once we tried to look at it and we said, okay, go to the pricing screen, my application or this program was taking a screen print instantly. But it actually took, a couple seconds, maybe a second, for the pricing information to be displayed. So I needed to wait a couple seconds so that I could get that screen print. And then once I got that screen print, I didn't need to wait anymore, and I can just paste it into my screen prints tab and move on to the next one. So that's how this works. Let me see if there was anything else I wanted to go over in here. You do have the Excel file here. I didn't show you how to enable Excel files. I did have to close it and reopen it. But I will say it takes a little bit of knowledge of VBA to make this work. But if you spend some time on it and you kind of learn about it, this will give you a really good way to figure out how to automate some of your processes in SAP just using Excel, something you already have. And it can be really powerful. Again, like I said, in the past, I had 250 samples in here and I would just let it run. Sometimes issues would happen. Um, and I could stop it, but then it would still get through like 100 or 200 or 150 samples before I had to think through, okay, maybe something else is different happening, and you either need to adjust your script a little bit to make it work better for what you need to do, or you can, if nothing's really a problem, you can just delete the ones that work successfully and tell it to start over again on the ones that are remaining. But it helped save a lot of time whenever pulling stuff from SAP. So I hope this was helpful. If you guys have questions or issues as you're working on it, let me know. Thanks. Bye.